Lily Adams clutched her father's pocket watch as three men dragged her through the dust-choked street of Promise Creek, their rough hands cutting into her skin, their voices low and menacing as curious onlookers ducked into doorways or turned their backs, unwilling to intervene against the notorious Blackburn Gang. "You'll pay for your pa's debts one way or another, pretty lady," growled the tallest outlaw, his breath reeking of whiskey as he yanked her forward, causing her to stumble and fall to her knees in the dirt. The spring of 1873 had brought little rain to the Texas border town, and the street was hard as iron beneath her. "Please," she begged, her voice catching on a sob. "I told you I need more time." "The store's barely making enough. Time's up," the second man cut in, his scarred face twisting into a cruel smile as he pulled her up by her arm. "Maybe Hollister'll change his mind about collectin' when he sees what we brought him instead of cash." Lily struggled against their grip, her honey-blonde hair falling loose from its pins, her blue calico dress already torn at the shoulder. Just 3 months ago, she'd been teaching school back east, but her father's death had brought her to this wild frontier town to take over his general store and apparently his gambling debts as well. "Let me go," she cried out, twisting against their hold as they dragged her toward the saloon where their boss waited. People were watching now, but no one moved to help. The Blackburn Gang had held Promise Creek in their grip for too long. Everyone knew better than to cross them. Then a voice cut through the commotion, low and steady as steel. "Let her go." The outlaws froze, and Lily looked up through tear-blurred eyes to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun, the brim of his hat pulled low over his face, one hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. "This ain't your business, stranger," the third outlaw snarled, though Lily noticed his hand trembled slightly as he spoke. The cowboy took a step forward, and now Lily could see his face tanned by the sun, with clear gray eyes that assessed the situation with unnerving calm. He couldn't have been more than 25, but something in his bearing suggested he'd seen far more of life than his years would suggest. "I'm making it my business," he replied simply. "Now let her go, or we're gonna have trouble." The tallest outlaw sneered, letting go of Lily's arm to reach for his gun, but the stranger's hand moved in a blur. Before the outlaw could clear his holster, the cowboy's revolver was aimed squarely at his chest. "I wouldn't," the stranger advised. "I'm faster, and we both know it." A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant piano from the saloon and the creak of a windmill at the edge of town. Then, with a curse, the outlaw released Lily completely. "Hollister ain't gonna like this," the scarred man warned, backing away. "Hollister can take it up with me personally," the cowboy replied. "Now get." The three men retreated, throwing dark looks over their shoulders as they headed back toward the saloon. Only when they disappeared inside did the stranger holster his weapon and turn his full attention to Lily. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "Just my pride," she managed, though her wrist throbbed where they'd gripped it. She straightened her dress as best she could, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "Thank you, Mr. Owens. Oliver Owens." He offered his hand to help her stand. "And you're welcome, Mississippi. Adams. Lily Adams." She took his hand, noticing the calluses that spoke of hard work, not just gunplay. His touch was surprisingly gentle for a man who'd just faced down 3 armed outlaws without flinching. "Miss Adams, I think you'd better get somewhere safe. Those men won't stay away for long, especially once they report to Hollister." She nodded, painfully aware that safe was a relative term in Promise Creek. "I have my father's store just down the street. I should get back. I left it unattended when they grabbed me." Oliver looked down the street thoughtfully, then back at her. "I'll walk with you if you don't mind. Make sure you get there without further trouble." "I'd appreciate that," she said, relief washing over her. As they walked, she couldn't help stealing glances at her rescuer. His clothes were trail-worn but clean dark pants, a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, a leather vest, and boots that had clearly seen many miles. The gun he'd drawn with such speed was back in its holster, and she noticed he walked with a slight limp on his left side. "You're new to Promise Creek," she observed. Not a question in a town this size, a stranger was immediately noticed, especially one who moved like he did. "Just rode in this morning," he confirmed. Was planning to stay just long enough to resupply before heading north. They reached the general store, and Lily fumbled with her key, her hands still shaking slightly. Inside, the familiar smell of coffee, leather, and dry goods welcomed her. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes and golden beams across the worn plank floor. "This is your store?" Oliver asked, looking around with interest. "It was my father's," she explained, moving behind the counter, seeking the security of that barrier. "He passed 3 months ago. I came from Philadelphia to settle his affairs, but—" She gestured vaguely at the modest establishment. "I discovered there was much more to settle than I'd anticipated, including debts to men like Hollister," Oliver concluded, his perception uncomfortably accurate. Lily sighed, pushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear.
"Yes.
Apparently, my father had a weakness for poker. I've been trying to make payments from the store's earnings, but it's not enough. Today was the deadline, and I couldn't meet it." Oliver nodded, his expression thoughtful as he studied the store's inventory. "What kind of figures are we talking about?" She echoed, raising an eyebrow. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Figure of speech. But I'm curious." She hesitated, then decided there was little harm in telling him. $300. An impossible sum for a small store like this. He let out a low whistle.
"That's steep."
But not impossible. His eyes continued to take in the store's layout, lingering on the spaces where shelves stood half empty. "Your inventory's low. The stage with my supply shipment is 2 days late," she explained, "which doesn't help matters." Oliver moved to the window, looking out at the street with watchful eyes. "Miss Adams, I don't mean to alarm you, but I suspect those men will be back, probably with reinforcements. Hollister's not the type to let a debt or a slight go unpaid." Fear fluttered in her chest, but she lifted her chin.
"What would you suggest?"
"I can't run this store is all I have left of my father, and I certainly can't pay." He turned from the window, his gray eyes meeting hers directly. "I might have a proposition for you. Mr. Owens, we've only just met, and while I appreciate your intervention earlier," he raised a hand, a glint of amusement in his eyes despite the seriousness of the situation. "Nothing improper, I assure you. I'm heading to my brother's ranch north of here. He's been asking me to help him expand his operation. I've got some capital to invest, and from what I can see, this town could use a well-stocked general store." Lily stared at him, trying to understand what he was suggesting. "You want to invest in my store?" "I want to pay off your debt to Hollister, in exchange for a partnership," he clarified. "The store stays yours, but I get a percentage of the profits once it's running properly." "Why would you do that? You don't know me, you don't even know if this store can be profitable." Oliver shrugged, his manner straightforward. "I've got a good sense for business opportunities. Promise Creek is growing, railroads coming through next year if the rumors are true. A general store with the right inventory, run by someone who knows what they're doing, could do very well." She studied him, searching for the deception, the angle that she was missing. Men didn't just ride into town and offer to solve a woman's problems without expecting something in return. "And how do I know you're not worse than Hollister? That I wouldn't just be trading one problem for another?" A shadow passed over his face, something like hurt, quickly masked. "You don't. But I gave you my real name, which is more than most would do if they had ill intentions." He reached into his vest and pulled out a folded letter, which he handed to her. "This is from my brother, James Owens. His ranch is called North Star, about 40 miles from here. You can ask around, he's well known and respected." Lily took the letter, noting the neat handwriting and the genuine tone as the writer urged his brother to join him in Texas. It seemed authentic, but she remained cautious. Even if I believed you, Mr. Owens, I couldn't accept such an arrangement. I don't take charity. It's not charity, it's business, he countered. And it would be a fair partnership. I provide the capital now. When you need it most, you provide the expertise and daily management. We both profit. She narrowed her eyes. And what makes you think I have expertise? I was a schoolteacher before I came here. You've kept this place running for 3 months despite everything working against you, he pointed out. That says something about your abilities. Besides, sometimes fresh eyes see opportunities others miss. A noise from outside interrupted their conversation, horses approaching at a trot. Oliver moved swiftly to the window. Looks like our friends are back, he said grimly. And they've brought Hollister himself this time. Lily's heart raced. Virgil Hollister was the most feared man in the county, controlling everything from the saloon to the bank through intimidation and violence. He rarely handled matters personally, which made his appearance now all the more threatening. Mr. Owens, you should go, she said urgently. This isn't your fight. He gave her a look that contained a surprising amount of warmth for a man she'd just met. Miss Adams, I haven't walked away from a fight that needed fighting since I was 16. I'm not about to start now. He checked his revolver with practiced ease. Stay behind the counter. If shooting starts, get down low. Before she could protest further, the door banged open, and 4 men entered, the 3 from earlier and a 4th, better-dressed man with a silver-streaked beard and cold eyes that assessed the store like a hawk studying prey. Well, Hollister said, his voice deceptively pleasant. This must be the drifter who thinks he can interfere in my business. His gaze shifted to Lily. Miss Adams, I'm disappointed. Your father always paid his debts one way or another. I expected the same courtesy from his daughter. Mr. Hollister, Oliver said before Lily could respond, his tone conversational. I understand there's a financial matter to resolve. I'm prepared to settle Miss Adams's debt in full today. Hollister's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of his surprise. Is that so? And why would you do that, Mr. Owens? Oliver Owens. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Hollister and the counter where Lily stood. Let's just say I see potential in this establishment that others might have missed. $300 is a significant investment for a potential you noticed just hours after riding into town, Hollister observed with dangerous amusement. Miss Adams must have made quite an impression. The terms of my arrangement with Miss Adams are between us, Oliver replied evenly. The question is, will you accept payment and consider the debt settled? Hollister studied Oliver for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes. Money's money. Pay the debt, and we'll call it square. He paused. For now. Oliver didn't react to the implied threat. Instead, he reached into his vest and pulled out a leather wallet. Counting out the bills methodically, he laid them on a nearby barrel. $300. I believe that concludes your business here. Hollister nodded to the scarred man, who stepped forward to count the money, then nodded confirmation. Seems our business is indeed concluded, Mr. Owens. Hollister tipped his hat with mock politeness. Miss Adams, always a pleasure. The 4 men departed, but not before Hollister turned in the doorway for a parting shot. Welcome to Promise Creek, Mr. Owens. It's always interesting when new blood comes to town. Tends to change the dynamics. When they were gone, Lily released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You actually paid him. I said I would. Oliver moved to the window again, watching as Hollister and his men crossed the street toward the saloon. That was your own money, she said, still processing what had happened. $300. Consider it an investment. He turned back to her, his expression serious. Now, about our partnership, I haven't agreed to any partnership, she reminded him, though her position had weakened considerably now that he'd actually paid her debt. Oliver smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through his careful exterior. Fair enough. How about we discuss the details over supper? You can explain what the store needs, and I can tell you a bit more about myself so you're not partnering with a complete stranger. Despite herself, Lily found she was curious about this man who'd ridden into her life so unexpectedly. There's a small restaurant at the hotel that serves decent food. I'll pick you up at 7 then, assuming you'll be closing the store by then. She nodded, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after the day's events. 7 would be fine. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. Miss Adams. Lily. I meant what I said. I think this store has potential, and so do you. Before she could respond, he added, lock this door behind me. I don't think they'll be back today, but better safe than sorry. After he left, Lily did as he suggested, then leaned against the door, her mind whirling. The day had taken the most unexpected turn from terror to a potential business partnership with a handsome stranger who'd risked his life for her without hesitation. It was the stuff of dime novels, not real life. Yet the bills Oliver had counted out to Hollister were real enough. And so was the prospect of turning her father's failing store into something that might actually provide her with a future in this rugged, dangerous place. She pushed away from the door, determination replacing confusion. Before she agreed to anything, she needed to know more about Oliver Owens. And she had just a few hours to make herself presentable for their business discussion. As she straightened merchandise and helped the few customers who ventured in that afternoon, Lily found her thoughts continually drifting back to the steady gray eyes and quiet confidence of the man who'd stepped into her life so unexpectedly. By 6:30, Lily had closed the store and changed into her best dress, a modest blue gown with white trim that complemented her eyes. She'd pinned her honey blonde hair into a neat arrangement and even dabbed a tiny bit of rose water behind her ears, a luxury she rarely indulged in these days. It's just a business discussion, she reminded her reflection in the small mirror hanging in her living quarters behind the store. But the flutter in her stomach suggested her body wasn't convinced of that fact. Promptly at 7, a knock sounded at the store's front door. When she opened it, she found Oliver waiting, his trail clothes replaced by a clean dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline previously obscured by stubble. His hat was in his hands, and his dark hair was neatly combed. Miss Adams, he greeted her, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes as he took in her appearance. You look lovely. Thank you, Mr. Owens, she replied, suddenly shy. You clean up quite well yourself. He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his suit. The evening air was cool and pleasant as they walked the short distance to the hotel, a 2-story building that was one of the few truly impressive structures in Promise Creek. The restaurant was quiet, with only a few other diners scattered among the tables covered with white cloths. The waiter seated them by a window overlooking the main street, now peaceful in the gathering dusk. I confess, Oliver said once they'd ordered, I've been thinking about how to convince you that a partnership would benefit us both. Lily smoothed her napkin in her lap. And I've been thinking about all the reasons I should be suspicious of your offer. He nodded, accepting her caution without offense. Ask me anything. I'll answer honestly. She studied him for a moment, then asked, Where are you from originally, Mr. Owens? Virginia. My family had a small farm there before the war. A shadow passed over his features. I lost my parents and younger sister to typhoid in '62. My brother James and I joined the Union Army afterward. He was 18, I was 16, though I lied about my age. You fought in the war, she said softly, understanding now some of the hardness she'd glimpsed in him. 3 years. Saw things no boy should see. He paused as the waiter brought their soup. After, James came west to start over. I stayed east, tried different jobs, worked on the railroad, did some cattle driving, even tried my hand at law enforcement for a while. That explains how you handle a gun, Lily observed. A corner of his mouth lifted. I was a decent shot before the war. Got better by necessity. He focused on his soup for a moment. Your turn. What brought a Philadelphia schoolteacher to the Texas frontier? My father's letter, she answered, her throat tightening at the memory. He wrote that he was ill, asked me to come. By the time I arrived, he was gone. She took a sip of water. I was his only family. I couldn't just sell everything and leave. It felt like abandoning him somehow. Oliver's eyes softened. I understand that feeling. Besides, she continued, going back to Philadelphia wasn't an option. I'd given up my teaching position, my apartment. Everything. I thought I'd be here just long enough to settle his affairs and then find something new. And instead you found a struggling store and debts to a man like Hollister. She nodded. The store actually did well when my father was healthy. He knew what people needed, ordered the right supplies. But in his final months, when he was sick, things fell apart. Oliver finished for her.
Yes.
And I've been trying to put them back together, but without capital for new inventory. Which brings us back to my proposal. Oliver leaned forward slightly. $300 was just the beginning. I'm prepared to invest another $500 to restock properly, repair what needs fixing, and really make this place thrive. Lily's eyes widened. $800 total? That's a significant investment, he acknowledged, but one I believe will pay off. This town is positioned to grow, especially with the railroad coming. A well-run general store could be very profitable. And what would you expect in return? She asked carefully. 40% of the profits for the first 2 years, after which we can renegotiate based on how the business is doing. He paused. And your word that you'll stay and run it properly. She raised an eyebrow. You're not planning to work in the store yourself? I'll help get it established, make some connections with suppliers I know from my travels. But my main focus will be helping my brother with his ranch. He smiled slightly. I'm not much for standing behind a counter, Miss Adams. The waiter brought their main course roast beef for Oliver, chicken for Lily. As they ate, she found herself warming to the idea of the partnership. Oliver answered all her questions with direct honesty, and his knowledge of business and supply networks was impressive. One thing still puzzles me, she said as they shared an apple pie for dessert. Why did you intervene today? You could have just kept walking when you saw those men dragging me through the street. Oliver was quiet for a moment. His fork paused midway to his plate. My sister, he finally said, his voice low. She was 17 when she died. But before the fever took her, there was a soldier, a Confederate, who'd broken away from his unit. He came to our farm looking for food, saw her alone. His jaw tightened. I wasn't there to protect her. I've never forgiven myself for that. Lily reached across the table impulsively, her fingers touching his wrist. I'm so sorry. He met her eyes, something vulnerable showing through his usual composure. When I saw those men dragging you, I didn't think. I just acted. Well, I'm very glad you did, she said softly, withdrawing her hand as she became aware of its placement. Their conversation shifted to lighter topics as they finished their meal. Lily found herself laughing at Oliver's dry observations about the characters he'd encountered in his travels, and she shared stories of her more memorable students from her teaching days. As they walked back to the store under a sky brilliant with stars, Lily made her decision. I accept your partnership offer, Mr. Owens. 40% for 2 years, with the option to renegotiate. He smiled, his face handsome in the moonlight. I think such a partnership calls for first names, don't you, Lily? I suppose it does. Oliver. His name felt right on her lips, as if she'd been meant to say it. They reached the store, and Lily fumbled with her key, suddenly awkward as the evening came to its natural conclusion. Would you like to come in for coffee? I should get back to the hotel, he declined gently. We both have a busy day tomorrow if we're going to start turning this store around. She nodded, oddly disappointed. Of course. Shall we meet in the morning to discuss the details? 8 o'clock, he confirmed. Then, with a formality that somehow made the gesture more meaningful, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a brief kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Lily Adams. Good night, Oliver, she whispered, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. As she watched him walk away, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness, Lily wondered what she had gotten herself into. A business partnership. Yes, but there was something in Oliver's gray eyes that suggested possibilities beyond ledger books and inventory lists. For the first time since arriving in Promise Creek, Lily felt a flutter of hope for her future. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Oliver invested the additional $500, and together they transformed the struggling general store. They expanded the inventory, adding quality tools, fabric, and household goods that had been missing from the shelves. Oliver's connections helped secure better prices from suppliers, and he hired a carpenter to build new shelving and repair the sagging porch. Lily found herself enjoying their partnership more than she had anticipated. Oliver had a keen mind for business and respected her input, never treating her as less capable because she was a woman. When they disagreed, their discussions were spirited but productive, usually resulting in compromises that improved their original ideas. News of the store's revival spread quickly through Promise Creek and to nearby farms and ranches. Customers who had been taking their business elsewhere returned, pleased with the expanded selection and fair prices. Oliver split his time between the store and his brother's ranch, often riding the 40 miles between the two properties. Despite his frequent absences, Lily found herself looking forward to his returns with an eagerness that went beyond business concerns. One evening in late June, after a particularly successful day, they sat on the store's newly repaired porch, enjoying the cooling air and the satisfaction of watching customers leave with well-filled parcels. We did good work today, Oliver observed, his sleeves rolled up, collar open in concession to the summer heat. Yes, we did, Lily agreed, fanning herself with a piece of cardboard. Her hair was coming loose from its pins after a long day, and her cheeks were flushed with the combination of heat and accomplishment. Mrs. Peterson bought enough fabric to outfit her entire family for the next year. Oliver chuckled, the sound warm in the gathering dusk. And Henderson finally bought that plow he's been eyeing for 3 weeks. Only after you convinced him it was worth the investment, she reminded him. He shrugged modestly. Just pointed out what he already knew, that good tools pay for themselves. Lily studied him in the soft light of early evening. Over the past weeks, she'd learned to read his expressions, to understand the meaning behind his economical words. She discovered his quiet sense of humor, his unwavering integrity, and the deep loyalty he felt toward those he cared about. What? He asked, noticing her gaze. I was just thinking how fortunate it was that you rode into Promise Creek that day, she said honestly. A smile touched his lips. Fortunate for both of us, I'd say. He hesitated, then added, Lily, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about. Her heart quickened. Yes, but before he could continue, the sound of approaching horses interrupted the moment. 3 riders appeared, silhouetted against the setting sun. Hollister's men, including the scarred one who'd grabbed Lily that first day. Oliver stood, his posture changing subtly, alert and ready. Evening, gentlemen. Stores closed for the day. We ain't here to shop, the scarred man said, dismounting. The other 2 remained on their horses, hands resting meaningfully near their weapons. Mr. Hollister wants to see you. Both of you. Lily rose to stand beside Oliver, fear and defiance warring within her. What does he want? Didn't say. Just that you should come now. The man's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Oliver's hand brushed against Lily's, a small gesture of reassurance. And if we decline this invitation? The man smirked. Then we're supposed to be more persuasive. A tense moment passed as Oliver assessed their options. 3 against 1 weren't good odds, even for someone as skilled as he was. "We'll come," he finally said, his voice steady. "Lead the way." As they walked down the street toward Hollister's saloon, Oliver kept close to Lily. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Whatever he wants, we'll handle it." "I'm not afraid," she whispered back, though her racing pulse belied her words. The Silver Dollar Saloon was crowded that evening, but a path cleared for them as the patrons recognized Hollister's men escorting the store owners. At a table in the back, Virgil Hollister sat alone, nursing a glass of whiskey, his cold eyes watching their approach. "Miss Adams, Mr. Owens," he greeted them, gesturing to the empty chairs across from him. "Please join me." They sat, and Oliver positioned himself slightly in front of Lily, his body language protective without being obvious. "What can we do for you, Mr. Hollister?" he asked directly. Hollister swirled his whiskey thoughtfully. "Your store is doing well, I hear. Quite the turnaround in just a few weeks." "We've been fortunate," Lily said cautiously. "Fortune, hard work, and good business sense," Hollister corrected her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Which is why I've called you here. I have a proposition." Oliver remained silent, waiting for Hollister to continue. "I want to buy you out," Hollister stated bluntly. "Both of you. 500 for the building and inventory." Lily stiffened. "The store isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale for the right price," Hollister countered. 700 then. "The inventory alone is worth more than that," Oliver pointed out calmly. "Not to mention the building." Hollister's expression hardened. 800. "That's my final offer." "Why do you want the store?" Lily asked, her mind racing. "You already own the saloon, the hotel, the railroad," Oliver interrupted, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You've heard something about the railroad plans." A flicker of annoyance crossed Hollister's face. "You're sharper than you look, Owens." "Yes, there's been a change. The line's coming through closer to town than originally planned. Right past where your store sits, in fact." Lily exchanged a glance with Oliver, comprehending the implications. If the railroad built a station near their location, the value of their property would multiply many times over. "Our answer is still no," Oliver said firmly. "The store isn't for sale at any price." Hollister leaned forward, his pleasant demeanor dropping away. "I wasn't asking, Owens. This town runs my way. Always has." "Times change," Oliver replied, his voice quiet but unyielding. "Not that much." Hollister snapped his fingers, and suddenly his men were closer, hands on their weapons. "I'm giving you a chance to walk away with money in your pockets and your health intact. I suggest you take it." Lily felt a cold fear wash over her, but she straightened her spine. "My father built that store. I won't let you take it." "Brave words," Hollister said with mock admiration. "But ultimately foolish. You have until tomorrow to reconsider. After that, things might get difficult for you in Promise Creek." Oliver stood, offering his hand to Lily. "I believe our business is concluded, Mr. Hollister." As they walked out of the saloon into the night air, Lily's legs felt unsteady. Oliver kept a hand at the small of her back, guiding her across the street. "He'll make good on his threats," she said once they were out of earshot. "I know." Oliver's face was grim in the moonlight. "But he's not taking your store. I promise you that." They reached the store, and Lily unlocked the door, the familiar smell of leather and coffee offering little comfort tonight. Once inside, Oliver lit a lamp and turned to her. "Lily, about what I was going to say earlier, before we were interrupted. Is this really the time?" she asked, her nerves frayed by the confrontation with Hollister. Oliver took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "It might be the perfect time. Lily Adams, I didn't come to Promise Creek by accident." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "My brother's ranch is real enough, but I was on my way back east when I stopped here. I had no plans to stay until—" He paused, searching for words. "Until I saw you being dragged through the street, and something inside me couldn't bear to see you hurt. Oliver, let me finish, he said gently. These past weeks, working with you, getting to know you, I've never met anyone like you, Lily. Your courage, your determination, your kindness. He took a deep breath. What I'm trying to say is, I care for you.
Deeply.
As more than a business partner. Her heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. You do. I do. His gray eyes held hers, sincere and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. And I hope you might feel something for me too. Lily couldn't find words for a moment, overwhelmed by emotions she'd been keeping carefully contained. I do, she finally whispered. I've been trying not to, telling myself it was foolish, but… Oliver's face softened with relief and something deeper. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned down and kissed her. His lips were gentle against hers, asking rather than demanding, and Lily found herself responding with a feeling that had been building since that first day. When they parted, she stayed in the circle of his arms, her head resting against his chest, where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. For a moment, the threat of Hollister seemed distant and manageable. We'll face him together, Oliver murmured into her hair. Whatever comes. What came was fire. They were awakened just before dawn by shouting and the acrid smell of smoke. Oliver, who had insisted on sleeping in the store's back room to ensure Lily's safety, was on his feet instantly. Get dressed quickly, he ordered, pulling on his own clothes with rapid efficiency. The store's on fire. Lily scrambled into her dress, her fingers fumbling with buttons as panic threatened to overwhelm her. By the time she emerged from her room, smoke was seeping under the door that connected the living quarters to the store. We can't go that way, Oliver said, assessing the situation with remarkable calm. Windows are best bet. He helped her climb through the small window at the back of the building, then followed her out into the alleyway. Around the front, they could hear shouting as townspeople formed a bucket brigade, but the flames had already taken hold of the wooden structure. Lily watched in horror as the store, her father's legacy, her home, their future, was consumed by hungry flames. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through the soot that had already settled on her skin. It was Hollister, she said, her voice raw with emotion. He did this. Oliver's jaw tightened as he put an arm around her shoulders. Yes, but he won't get away with it. They joined the firefighting efforts, but it was too late. By sunrise, all that remained of Adam's general store was a smoldering shell, the inventory destroyed, the dream reduced to ashes. As the townspeople dispersed, murmuring sympathies, but avoiding eye contact, Lily stood among the ruins, numb with shock and loss. Oliver remained beside her, his presence the only solid thing in a world suddenly turned to chaos. What do we do now? She asked, her voice small. Before Oliver could answer, the sound of approaching horses made them both turn. Hollister rode at the head of a group of his men, his expression one of mock concern as he surveyed the destruction. What a terrible accident, he called out, reining his horse to a stop before them. Old buildings like this, all that dry wood, a spark from the stove, is all it takes. There was no spark from any stove, Oliver said, his voice dangerously controlled. This was deliberate. Hollister shrugged, not bothering to deny the accusation. Unfortunate, whatever the cause. My offer still stands, though, for the land. $500, considering there's no building anymore. Lily felt something snap inside her. Grief gave way to rage, clearing her mind with startling clarity. You burned down my store, and then expect me to sell you the land? You're not just cruel, Mr. Hollister. You're a fool. Hollister's expression darkened. Careful, Miss Adams. You're in a precarious position. No, you are, Oliver interjected, stepping forward. His hand didn't move toward his gun, but the threat was implicit in his stance. You've made a serious miscalculation. Have I? Hollister's smile was cold. Look around you, Owens. This is my town. No one's going to stand with you against me. You're wrong. The new voice came from behind them. Turning, they saw a group of townspeople approaching the blacksmith, the barber, the hotel owner, and several ranchers from the surrounding area. Leading them was James Owens, Oliver's brother, a tall man with the same gray eyes and determined expression. "These good people sent for me," James explained, coming to stand beside Oliver and Lily. "Seems they've had enough of Mr. Hollister's particular brand of governance." Hollister's confident smile faltered as he counted the growing crowd. "This doesn't concern any of you. When you burn down a business to force a sale, it concerns all of us," the blacksmith called out. "Who's next when you decide you want their property?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering, which had grown to include most of the town. "We've tolerated your bullying because we were afraid," the hotel owner added. "But no more." Hollister looked to his men, but even they seemed uncertain, outnumbered as they were by the determined townspeople. "You're making a mistake," Hollister warned, but his voice lacked its usual authority. Oliver stepped forward. "No, you made the mistake, Hollister. Leave Promise Creek.
Today.
Don't come back." "Or what?" Hollister challenged, though his bluster was weakening. "Or I'll personally ensure you face charges for arson," James Owens stated calmly. "As the newly appointed marshal for this county, I have that authority." Hollister's face paled. "Marshal." James nodded, opening his coat to reveal the badge pinned to his vest. "The governor was most interested to hear reports of your activities. Seems your reach doesn't extend quite as far as you thought." A tense silence followed as Hollister weighed his options. Finally, with a curse, he wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over," he spat, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. As Hollister and his men rode out of town, a cheer went up from the gathered crowd. People surrounded Lily and Oliver, offering sympathy, support, and promises to help rebuild. "I can't believe it," Lily whispered to Oliver as they accepted the townspeople's kindness. "They stood up to him for us." "For themselves, too," Oliver pointed out. "But yes, it seems Promise Creek has more promise than we realized." James approached them, clapping his brother on the shoulder before turning to Lily. "Miss Adams, I'm sorry about your store. Oliver's told me a lot about you in his letters, all good things." "Thank you, Marshal Owens," she replied, still processing the morning's events. "And thank you for coming when you did." "Call me James," he insisted with a smile that reminded her of Oliver's. "And I'd have come sooner if I'd known what was happening." Oliver can be stubborn about asking for help. Oliver rolled his eyes at his brother, but there was affection in the gesture. "Bot, gullah." As the crowd began to disperse, James pulled Oliver aside for a private conversation. Lily watched them, wondering what new complications might be emerging. When Oliver returned to her side, his expression was thoughtful. "James has an interesting proposition for us." "Another one?" Lily asked wryly. "I'm not sure I can handle any more propositions today." Oliver smiled, taking her hands in his. "This one's good, I promise. The railroad's definitely coming, and they're building a station right where our store stood. James says the company's looking for someone to run the station and the attached mercantile." Hope flickered in Lily's chest. "And he thinks that could be us?" "Us," Oliver repeated, his eyes warm on hers. "Yes, he does. It would mean rebuilding bigger and better than before, with the railroad's backing." "That sounds incredible," Lily admitted, allowing herself to imagine the possibilities. "There's one catch," Oliver added, his expression turning serious. "The railroad prefers to contract with families, not business partners." Lily blinked, not immediately understanding. "Families?" Oliver took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee among the ashes of the store, still holding her hands. "Lily Adams, I had planned a more romantic setting for this, but life doesn't always go according to plan. I love you. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you fighting against those men in the street. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Lily's eyes, but they were different from those she'd shed earlier. These were tears of joy, of possibilities, of a future suddenly opening before her. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Oliver Owens. I will marry you." He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made several onlookers cheer and whistle. When they parted, both were laughing, the joy of their connection momentarily eclipsing the destruction around them. "We'll rebuild," Oliver promised, his forehead resting against hers. "Everything." 1 year later, the Adams and Owens Railroad Mercantile stood proud on the spot where the old general store had burned. Twice the size of the original building, with large windows and a wide porch, it served both the town and the travelers who arrived daily on the new railroad line. Behind the store, Oliver had built a comfortable house for their growing family. Lily was expecting their first child in the spring. James had made Promise Creek his base of operations as county marshal, effectively ending any remaining influence from Hollister and his men, who had scattered to other territories. On the anniversary of the fire, as they closed the store for the evening, Oliver pulled Lily into his arms, his hand resting gently on the curve of her stomach. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Owens," he murmured, kissing her softly. "Which one?" she teased. "The fire or our wedding?" "Both," he decided. "The day we lost everything, and the day we gained everything." Lily smiled, remembering the path that had brought them here from that first desperate moment in the street to now, surrounded by the life they'd built together. "I'm glad you stepped in that day. I'm glad you told them to let me go." "Best decision I ever made," Oliver said, his gray eyes full of love. "And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." As the sun set over Promise Creek, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lily and Oliver stood together on their porch, watching the future arrive with each train that pulled into the station beside their store. From tragedy had come triumph, from ashes a new beginning, and from a chance encounter in a dusty street, a love that would endure long after the Wild West had faded into legend.